Alright, so we are going to be doing things a little differently from here on out for the next 2 weeks. Usually on Mondays and Wednesdays, we have actual class times, but we decided that if you know what you're doing, then you should be able to take the work, do it, and be done for the week. So the way things are going to work, I'm going to be posting your videos and assignments on Monday. If you finish them and if you do good on them, then you're good to go for the week. If not, you are required to come to those class times on Monday or Wednesday. They'll serve tutorials. We'll try to get whatever we need to get fixed. That way you can get your OTM for the week. If you choose to just go through the assignments real quick and just guess on them, whatever, and call it good, you will not pass summer school. So just because you finish the work does not mean that you're good to go. You do need to learn this material. You will need it for the upcoming years. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the first topic of this week. We did just plain solving equations last week. That was our first intro. We're now doing solving equations and we're bringing in the distributive property. So we're still going to keep all of our solving steps in mind. The first thing when you are solving with the distributive property, you have to get rid of your parentheses. So you're going to have an equation that looks something like x plus 2, maybe there's a 2 on the outside, is equal to 4. And what I mean by get rid of your parentheses, you have to take whatever is on the outside and distribute it in. So we're going to multiply everything on the inside by whatever's on the outside. Now once you do that, we're going to go through plenty of examples, but for here you would do 2 times x, which would give you just 2x, plus 2 times 2 is 4, and that's equal to 4. At this point, there's no more parentheses, so you will go to step 2, and you're going to follow your solving steps, which is what we covered last week. Now we are going to do some expansion and rewriting with just numbers so you can see how the distributive property works, and then you'll be able to use that with the equations. So in this example, I'm asking you to expand 16 times 13 plus 12. Another way this can be written and how it'll be written with your equations would be 16 parentheses 13 plus 12. Remember, if something is stuck right next to another thing like parentheses or a variable, it means multiplication. So what I'm wanting you to do here is just to write out the expanded version. So remember, I told you we take whatever is on the outside and we're going to multiply it by everything on the inside. So now I'm going to have 16 times 13 plus, and then you have 16 times 12. All we did was multiply that outside 16 by everything in parentheses. We keep that addition there. It goes between the two sets of parentheses, and that's all I want you to do when I'm asking you to expand. So example 2 is the reverse of example 1. Example 1, I gave you the short version. I asked you for the long version. Here I'm giving you the long and I'm asking for the short. So the first thing you need to do is look at what you're given and see what repeats. So when I look here, I have 11 and I have an 11. Since the 11s repeat, I know that's going on the outside of the parentheses. 11 times, and then you take whatever is left. So I have a 10, a 5, and I have this plus sign because remember, your multiplication is done by the parentheses. So what I'm putting inside parentheses is going to be 10 plus 5. So you'll be asked to expand in your assignment and also rewrite in your assignment. So remember how we did it here. Now this next one is a little weird. It's more problem solving. I'm asking you in example 3 to find the value of the triangle. So your triangle is right here at the very end. Now the original is 6 times 10 and they broke it apart, but they broke it apart into subtraction. So I'm going to do some canceling out just so we can see what we really need to look at. So I have this 6 on the left side and I have 2 of them on the right. So I'm going to cancel them out, get rid of them. Now when I'm looking at what's left, I have 10 is equal to 11 minus the triangle. So when I think about it, 10 is less, that's why we're doing subtraction. What can I subtract from 11 to get 10? So 10 is equal to 11 minus our triangle. When I think about it, all I need is to subtract a 1 to get that 10. So I know that 10 is equal to 11 minus 1. 10 is equal to 10, so we're good there. So I know that my triangle in this problem is equal to 1. All right, so we are now officially going to get into solving with distributing. So I'm just going to rewrite it over here to the right. You have negative and then parentheses x minus 2 is equal to 10. Remember, I told you your first step is to get rid of the parentheses. So I have to multiply whatever is outside the parentheses by everything inside the parentheses. But if I look here, I'm only given this negative sign. You need to remember, if there is no number there, it is not 0. It is 1. So I'm going to multiply everything in parentheses by negative 1. So when I do negative 1 times x, I'm left with negative x. When I have negative 1 minus 2 or times minus 2, I have positive 2. And then the right side stays the same. It's still equal to 10. Now, just like in solving, my ultimate goal is to get this x by itself. But we have something else over here on the side. We have the 2. I need to move it to the other side, so I have to do the inverse or the opposite. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So then I have negative x is equal to 8. But remember, for solving, your end goal is x or whatever variable equals something, a number. But I have a negative x here. You can divide by your negative 1 if you want to, but all you need to remember is you need to change the sign. So negative x becomes positive x. Since I went and changed it on the left side, I need to change it on the right side. So my positive 8 is now going to be a negative 8. So your answer for example 4 is x equals negative 8. All right, so example 5. We're still going to solve. We're going to distribute. So our first step is we need to get rid of our parentheses. To do that, I take everything on the outside, so negative 3, and I'm going to multiply it by everything on the inside. It's going to be 2 separate steps here. So negative 3 times x leaves me with negative 3x. And then I do negative 3 times a positive 1, and that gives me negative 3. And remember, it's still equal to 12 on the right side. So ultimately, you want to get the x by itself, but it's stuck to the negative 3, so we're going to settle for getting that by itself first. What else? If I was to cover up the negative 3x, I still have the negative or the minus 3 on the left. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. When I do that on the left side, remember it cancels out. So negative 3x is equal to 12 plus 3 gives me 15. And this is our last step for solving. You do not add or subtract 3 here. The negative 3 and the x are stuck together by multiplication, so the only way to undo that, or the inverse of that, is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. When that happens, I'm left with x equals, and then 15 divided by negative 3 gives me a negative 5. All right, so this next one, example 6, is very similar to example 5. We take our negative 2 that's on the outside and we want to distribute it in. So negative 2 times 2x gives you a negative 4x. And then negative 2 times a negative 4 gives me a positive 8. Make sure you're really careful with your negatives because they will mess you up. And it's still equal to 16 on the right side. I want to get that negative 4x by itself. So in order to move the 8 to the other side, I have to subtract it, do the inverse or the opposite. When I do that on the left side, it cancels out, and I'm left with negative 4x equals, and you have 16 minus 8, which should leave you with just positive 8. And then your last step is to get the x by itself. The negative 4 and the x are stuck together by multiplication, so the only way to undo that is division. I divide both sides by everything in front of the x, so negative 4. Divide by negative 4 on the right side. When I do that on the left, it cancels out, and I'm just left with x, which is then equal to 8 divided by negative 4, and that gives you negative 2. So example 7, I'm asking you in words to state what the first step to solve this equation is. And we've done quite a bit of practice on this already. There's been about 3 examples. I even gave you steps in one of the first slides. So I told you your first step always with these is to get rid of your parentheses. And these notes are called solving equations by the distributive property. And remember, you need to associate getting rid of your parentheses with distributing. So your first step here is we're going to take this 6 and distribute it into the parentheses. So in words, you would write, we are going to distribute the 6 And you can leave it at that, or you can say distribute the 6 into the parentheses. And this is just getting you familiar, making sure you know how to put in words what the first step to solve would be. So example 8, I'm actually going to have you do this on your own. I want you in words to state what the first step to solve this equation is. And it's -4, parentheses 7 plus v is equal to 28. So if you need to look back at example 7, go ahead. There will be a question popping up asking you to pick which answer choice is the correct first step. Now with distributing, there are a couple different ways that we can start to solve equations. The first one, of course, is just our regular distributing. So first way, you have 3 times x plus 2 is equal to 12. So we could first take that 3 and multiply it into parentheses. So I'm just going to go through the first step here so you can see it. So you would have 3 times x, which gives you 3x, plus 3 times 2 gives us 6, and it equals 12. That's the first way. That's what we've been doing. Now the second way leans more towards what we're doing with our solving and inverses. So your second way, I'm just going to rewrite it again. 3 times x plus 2 equals 12. If I had something that was like 2x equals 8, your step to solve this would be divide by 2 because they're stuck together by multiplication. So we want to think about that here too. I want to pretend like this whole parenthesis is just an x. So 3 is stuck to the parentheses by multiplication. In order to undo it, I could also divide both sides by 3. So you could divide by whatever's in front of the parentheses. What that does is it cancels out the 3 on the outside, and you're left with x plus 2 equals 12 divided by 3 would give you 4. So this is another way that you could have a different first step. Now example 10 is exactly like example 9, except I give you a different number. So I want you to list the 2 different ways that you could start to solve this equation. I am going to have different answer choices on a question pop up, so you're going to have to choose which ways could be correct first ways, but make sure you just work it out just like example 9. And then example 11 again is just like example 9 and 10. Go ahead and see what are the different ways you could start to solve this equation. So I am going to use that new way that we just kind of talked about to solve example 12. It is a preference, really just whatever you decide. Sometimes the dividing out first does not work if the 2 numbers you're dividing aren't whole numbers. So I am going to take both sides and divide by whatever is in front of the parentheses. In this case, it is the -5. When I do it on the right side, my -5's cancel out, and I'm just left with x minus 6. And then when I do 60 divided by -5 on the left, I'm left with -12. Now, since there's nothing in front of the parentheses, you can go ahead and get rid of them. So I'm just left with x minus 6 on the right side. I want to get that x by itself, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. When I do that on the right side, it goes away and you're just left with x. And on the left side, you have -12 plus 6, which should give you a -6. Remember, if you wanted to distribute that -5 and multiply it by everything in parentheses, that's fine too. They'll both get you the same exact answer. All right, so example 13, I'm going to go ahead and just show you distributing one more time to keep it fresh on your mind. We're going to multiply this 6 by everything in parentheses. So 6 times 1 gives you 6. 6 times a -x gives us -6x. And then it's equal to 12 on the right side. I want to get this -6x by itself, so I need to move the +6 to the right. Just because there's not a plus in front of it does not mean it's not positive. So we have to do the opposite and subtract it from both sides. When I do that on the left side, it goes away, and I'm left with -6x, and it's equal to 12 minus 6 gives us +6. Now your last step to solve for x by itself is to divide by whatever is in front of the x, so -6. That gives me just 1x, or x, and 6 divided by -6 leaves me with a -1. Alright, example 14 is our last example, so I am going to go ahead and show you distributing one more time to make sure it's fresh on your mind. I want to multiply this -2 in parentheses, so -2 times x gives me negative 2x. Negative 2 times a positive 1 gives me a negative 2, and it's still equal to 20 on the right side. I want to get the negative 2x by itself, so I'm going to do the opposite of subtracting 2. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. When I do that on the left, it cancels out, and I'm left with negative 2x is equal to 20 plus 2, which leaves us with 22. And then your last step here is to get whatever is in front of the x and divide both sides by that. So it is negative 2. So I'm going to divide my left side and my right side by negative 2. It leaves me with x equals, and 22 divided by negative 2 is negative 11. Alright, so a reminder, this Ed Puzzle, this video is one assignment for the week. So that's in place of the Monday, Wednesday class time. You still have to do the Google Classroom assignment as well. You need to complete the assignment on your own sheet of paper, correct any of the questions you missed. It'll tell you which ones. Sometimes it's just an error, you inputted it wrong. I go back and correct those. And then you need to email or submit pictures of your worked out problems on Google Classroom. So on the assignment submission on Google Classroom, there's a place for you to add a picture. You can just add a picture of your work there. If you want to just email it to me, that's fine too. But you have to have those pictures of your work to get full credit. So let me know if you have any questions on Google Classroom, email, anything like that. And I will see you in the next video.